Somewhere in the heart of the Nevada desert, surrounded by hundreds of miles of cracked earth and bleached sky, there is a place that the United States government spent decades pretending did not exist. No address, no sign, no acknowledgement, just a vast, scorched basin ringed by mountains, patrolled by unmarked jeeps, watched by motion sensors buried in the sand, and guarded by men who would tell you nothing, not even their own names. And yet somehow, this place became the most famous secret in the world. People drove from across the country to stand at its gates. Conspiracy theorists built entire cosmologies around it. Hollywood wrote alien invasions based on what they imagined lay inside. And even now, decades after the government finally admitted it exists, the mysteries surrounding it refuse to die quietly. This is the story of Area 51, the real one. The one that is stranger, more daring, and in many ways more astonishing than any science fiction ever written about it. Let's start where all the best stories start, with a problem nobody knew how to solve. It is 1953. The Cold War is not yet a metaphor, it is a living, breathing terror. Joseph Stalin sits in Moscow surrounded by a military machine that defeated the Nazis and now points its eyes at the West. The Soviet Union has tested a nuclear bomb. They have bombers capable of reaching American cities. And the most dangerous thing of all, nobody in Washington knows exactly what the Soviets are building next. Intelligence is everything, and American intelligence is nearly blind. Traditional spy planes flew too low and too slow. Cameras mounted on weather balloons drifted without precision. The CIA was desperate. They needed to see inside Soviet borders without triggering a war, without losing a pilot, and without the Soviets even knowing they had been watched. That need, urgent, classified, and almost impossibly ambitious, was the seed from which Area 51 was born. The man who cracked the problem was a brilliant, eccentric engineer named Kelly Johnson. Johnson ran Lockheed's Advanced Development Projects Division, a team so secretive its employees called it the Skunk Works, named after a fictional factory in a Lil Abner cartoon that brewed mysterious concoctions. Johnson and his team proposed something that had never been done before, an aircraft that could fly so high, so fast, and so stealthily that no Soviet radar or fighter jet could touch it. The plane would need to cruise at altitudes above 70,000 feet, nearly 14 miles above the Earth's surface, where the air was so thin that conventional engines barely functioned, where pilots needed pressurized suits to survive, and where the curvature of the planet itself was visible on the horizon. It would be unlike anything ever built, and it would need to be built in total secret. The CIA authorized the program in late 1954. They called it Project Aquatin. The plane would eventually be known as the U-2, but before a single spy photograph could be taken, they needed a place to test it. You cannot test a revolutionary secret aircraft at a normal Air Force base. Too many eyes, too many questions, so the CIA sent a team led by a man named Richard Bissell and Lockheed test pilot Tony LeVere to scout remote locations in the American West. What they found in a dried lakebed in the Nevada Test and Training Range, 60 miles north of Las Vegas, was exactly what they needed. Dry, flat, isolated, invisible. The lakebed was called Groom Lake. The surrounding area on early CIA maps was labeled simply as Area 51, referring to a grid square on an Atomic Energy Commission map of the Nevada test site. The name stuck, as names born in bureaucracy sometimes do, and became in time the most famous two words in conspiracy history. Construction began almost immediately. Workers arrived in the summer of 1955. They built a runway directly on the pale, compacted surface of the dried lake. They erected hangars, barracks, a control tower, a mess hall, and the infrastructure of a secret city that did not officially exist. Supply flights were disguised as routine Atomic Energy Commission traffic. Workers were shuttled in on unmarked aircraft, sworn to silence, and cut off from the outside world during their rotations. Lockheed engineers and CIA personnel lived side by side at this remote outpost, united by the knowledge that what they were building might change the course of the Cold War. And it did. The U-2 first flew from Groom Lake on August 1, 1955. Test pilot Tony LeVere lifted off from that pale, flat runway and climbed into the Nevada sky, pushing the strange, impossibly graceful aircraft. It looked like a powered glider with wings that seemed too long for its slender body, up toward the edge of the stratosphere. The flight was a success. The program was alive, and what followed was nothing short of remarkable. Over the next several years, U-2 aircraft launched from Groom Lake and from bases around the world, sailing silently over Soviet airfields, missile installations, and nuclear facilities, photographing targets that no human spy could ever approach. They photographed the Soviet bomber fleet. They tracked missile testing ranges. They gave American presidents a window into the most guarded nation on Earth. For several extraordinary years, the United States saw everything, and the Soviets saw nothing. But nothing stays secret forever. On May 1, 1960, a U-2 piloted by a CIA officer named Francis Gary Powers was shot down over Sverdlovsk in the Soviet Union. Powers survived, was captured, and stood trial in Moscow. President Eisenhower, who had initially denied that any spy plane existed, was forced into a humiliating public admission. The U-2 program was compromised, but the testing at Groom Lake did not stop. If anything, it intensified. Because even as Powers sat in a Soviet prison, Kelly Johnson and the Skunk Works team were already building something faster, higher, and more extraordinary than the U-2 had ever dreamed of being. They called it the A-12. Later versions would be known as the SR-71 Blackbird. It is by any measure one of the most astonishing aircraft ever constructed. It flew at speeds exceeding Mach 3, more than 3 times the speed of sound. At full cruise, it traveled faster than a rifle bullet. At altitude, it outran the surface-to-air missiles launched at it. Pilots reported that looking down from the SR-71's cockpit, you could watch the Earth rotate beneath you. The aircraft was so fast that its titanium skin heated to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit during flight, turning the plane a deep, heat-soaked black, which is how it earned its famous name. It was tested, developed, and perfected at Groom Lake. The workers and pilots who flew it knew they were operating at the extreme edge of what human beings and machines could do. Several of them died doing it. And this relentless classified sky-pushing work is the real story of Area 51, not aliens, not crashed saucers, but human beings doing things that seemed, to anyone watching from the ground, completely impossible. And people were watching. Here is something the CIA did not fully anticipate when they chose that remote Nevada basin. The Nevada test site, just to the southwest, was an active nuclear weapons testing ground throughout the 1950s. Civilians drove out from Las Vegas on weekends to watch atomic bombs detonate on the horizon, mushroom clouds rising like hellish flowers against the desert sky. Nuclear tourism was, impossibly, a real thing. And some of those civilians, peering into the sky above the desert, saw things they could not explain. Aircraft flying at impossible altitudes, catching the last light of the sun long after darkness had fallen on the ground below. Craft that moved with a silence and a grace that no known airplane possessed. Lights that appeared and disappeared without warning. What they were seeing almost certainly were prototype aircraft being tested out of Groom Lake. The U-2, flying at 70,000 feet, caught the sun like a silver thread in the darkening sky. The A-12, banking through a test maneuver, could seem to disappear and reappear as its dark surface caught and lost the light. These were real aircraft, classified aircraft, aircraft that the government could not acknowledge existed. And so when witnesses filed reports, when they called the military, when they asked their congressmen, the answer was always the same. Nothing was there, you saw nothing, there is nothing to see. That answer, repeated for years, stonewalled, denied, occasionally met with intimidation, was gasoline on a fire that had been burning since 1947. Because 1947 had given the world Roswell. In the summer of that year, something crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. The rancher, a man named Mac Brazel, found debris scattered across a wide field, metallic foil, rubber, wood, strange lightweight material unlike anything he recognized. He reported it to the local sheriff. The sheriff called Roswell Army Airfield. And in one of the most fateful press releases in American military history, the Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Officer issued a statement announcing that the Army had recovered a flying disc. The nation erupted, headlines screamed, and then within hours the military walked the whole thing back. It was a weather balloon, they said, just a weather balloon, nothing to see. It was, in fact, a debris field from Project Mogul, a classified program using high-altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The disc was not a spacecraft, but the correction came too late and with too little credibility and into a cultural moment that was not prepared to accept it. The flying saucer era had begun. And over the next decade, as UFO sightings proliferated, many of them in the skis above Nevada and New Mexico, near facilities the government refused to acknowledge, a parallel story began to build alongside the classified truth. In that parallel story, the government had not recovered a balloon. They had recovered a spacecraft. They had recovered bodies. And they had taken everything, every piece of evidence, every secret, to a hidden base in the Nevada desert where they were working to reverse engineer alien technology, to understand alien biology, and to conceal from the American people a truth so vast and so terrifying that admitting it would shake civilization to its foundation. Area 51 slid perfectly into that story. It was secret, it was real, it was guarded with lethal force, and the government would not say a single word about what went on inside it. The modern mythology of Area 51 was assembled, piece by piece, from fragments of truth and enormous inventions. In 1989, a man named Bob Lazar appeared on a Las Vegas television station and claimed in a calm, technical voice that he had worked at a facility near Area 51 called S4, where he had been tasked with reverse engineering the propulsion system of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. He described disc-shaped craft. He described a strange element 115 he called it, that powered them. He described alien biology experiments. He gave the whole story a texture of specificity and technical detail that made it irresistible. People who heard it could not dismiss it as the raving of a madman. He sounded like an engineer. He sounded like someone who had seen something real. For decades, Lazar's claims could not be verified. His educational credentials, which he said included degrees from MIT and Caltech, were impossible to confirm. The government denied he had ever worked for them. His story had contradictions. And yet in 1994, scientists confirmed the synthesis of element 115, now named moscovium, on the periodic table. Lazar's believers took this as vindication. His critics noted that the properties he had described did not match the real element at all. The debate never resolved. It never will. That is the nature of stories like this. They are built to be impossible to kill. Through the 1990s, the mythology deepened and spread. The television series The X-Files brought Area 51 into living rooms across the world, embedding it in popular consciousness as the place where the government kept its darkest secrets. Movies like Independence Day depicted alien spacecraft stored in vast underground hangars beneath the Nevada desert, their secrets guarded by faceless men in black. The culture had decided collectively and enthusiastically what Area 51 was. And the government's continued silence, its refusal to explain, to open, to account for itself, only fed the fire. The geography of the area seemed designed by some malevolent hand to heighten the mystery. The main highway approaching the base, Nevada State Route 375, became so associated with alien sightings that in 1996 the state of Nevada officially renamed it the Extraterrestrial Highway. Small towns along the route, most famously Rachel, Nevada, population in the dozens, became pilgrimage sites. A diner called the Little Elaine served alien-themed food and sold merchandise to the thousands of tourists who made the drive out into the desert to stand at the perimeter fence and stare toward the mountains, hoping to see anything that might confirm what they already believed. Orange warning signs announced that the use of deadly force was authorized. Cameras watched from atop low hills. Camouflage trucks sat motionless in the distance. The whole scene felt like theater, and perhaps it was, at least in part. The government understood by then that the mythology surrounding the base served certain purposes. It kept people focused on little green men rather than on black aircraft and classified avionics. The UFO believers were, in a perverse way, useful. But the pressure to acknowledge the truth eventually became irresistible. In 2013, the CIA declassified a series of documents that confirmed in dry bureaucratic language what researchers had long suspected. Groom Lake Area 51 was a real facility used for the testing of classified aircraft, including the U-2 and the OXCART, the A-12 program, and a number of other projects that remain partially or entirely classified even today. The documents confirmed locations, confirmed test flight records, confirmed that for decades the government had actively worked to conceal the base's existence from the public. It was, in its own way, a remarkable admission. The government said, yes, we lied, yes, it was real. Yes, there were secret things there, but they were aircraft, human aircraft built by Americans for a reason. What the documents did not say, and what the government has never said, is that there were no unusual materials, no extraterrestrial technology, no biological specimens, no crashed craft from another world. The declassified documents simply described what was confirmed, an aircraft testing program. Everything else the documents neither confirmed nor denied. And that absence of denial is, for true believers, as good as a confession. The thing about Area 51 that makes it so enduring, so stubbornly alive in the imagination, is that the true story is genuinely extraordinary. The aircraft built and tested there represent some of the most audacious engineering achievements in human history. The U-2 flew missions that changed the political calculus of the Cold War. The SR-71 remained, for decades, so far ahead of any other aircraft that it was effectively invulnerable. The F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth aircraft, was developed and tested at Groom Lake beginning in the 1970s, and it flew for years before its existence was publicly acknowledged. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber followed. Each of these aircraft, spotted in test flights over Nevada, generated UFO reports. Each one was, by the standards of its time, almost impossible to believe, almost impossible to explain, almost alien. That is the secret that the secret hides. The most astonishing thing about Area 51 is not that it might contain evidence of extraterrestrial life. It is that it contains evidence of what human beings are capable of when given unlimited resources, a total mandate for secrecy, and a problem urgent enough to demand the impossible. The engineers and pilots who worked at Groom Lake did not find alien technology, they invented it. They looked at the envelope of what was possible and they pushed it so far beyond where it had been that the people watching from the ground could not believe it was human, could not believe it was theirs, and so they invented another explanation, a more comfortable one that required no understanding of fluid dynamics or radar cross-section reduction or titanium metallurgy, one that simply said, it came from somewhere else. The perimeter of Area 51 extends for roughly 23 miles along its most accessible boundary. The fence line runs through dust and scrub brush and occasional Joshua trees, marked at intervals by orange warning posts and security cameras. If you walk to the edge of it, and tens of thousands of people have over the years making the dusty hike from the highway just to stand where the forbidden begins, you will see nothing of the base itself. The mountains block the view. The distance defeats the eye. You stand at the edge of an enormous national secret and you feel intensely and perhaps rightly that something significant is on the other side. You just cannot see it. You never can. In September 2019, a Facebook event titled Storm Area 51 They Can't Stop All of Us went viral with a peculiar, joking urgency. Millions of people clicked, attending. The idea was farcical, a Naruto-running charge at the gates of a classified military facility, but it captured something real in the cultural moment, a yearning to know, a frustration with official silence, a humor born from the absurdity of the decades-long standoff between the government's secrecy and the public's imagination. On the days of the event, a few thousand people actually made the pilgrimage to the Nevada desert. There were festivals, there were alien costumes. There were people dancing in the dust outside the gates. The military watched from a discreet distance. Nobody stormed anything. The gates did not open. The secrets, whatever they were, stayed secret. And they will go on staying secret, not because the government is hiding aliens, but because the work that happens at Groom Lake is, now as then, some of the most sensitive and advanced military development in the world. The aircraft being tested there today, whatever they are as far beyond the F-22 as the SR-71 was beyond the prop-driven fighters of World War II. The people who work there still sign the same kinds of non-disclosure agreements. They still fly in on unmarked aircraft. They still tell their families nothing about where they go or what they do. The tradition of absolute secrecy that was born in 1955 on that pale, flat lake bed continues, unbroken, into the present day. What has changed is the mythology. The alien narrative is older now, more nostalgic than urgent. The generation that grew up with X-Files posters on their walls is middle-aged. The internet has produced so many competing theories, so many rival conspiracies, so many alternative explanations, that the original Area 51 mythology has been diluted, remixed, parodied, and commodified into something more like entertainment than genuine belief. The little Elaine still operates. The extraterrestrial highway still runs through Rachel. Tourists still drive out on summer weekends to take photographs at the warning signs, but the fever is different now, more ironic, more self-aware. And yet there is still something when you stand at that perimeter fence, when you look out across the empty desert toward the mountains that hide whatever is behind them. There is still a feeling. A recognition that the world contains things you will never know, that power operates in registers you cannot access, that somewhere out there men and women are doing things that would astonish you, things that you would not believe, things that are so far outside ordinary experience that you could be forgiven for mistaking them for miracles, or for the work of visitors from another world. That feeling is not wrong. It is just aimed in the wrong direction. The miracle was never alien. The miracle was human. It always has been. The real mystery of Area 51 is not what the government is hiding from the public. The real mystery is what the public is hiding from itself, the ability to look at the impossible and recognize it as the work of ordinary people pushed to extraordinary extremes. The ability to believe that we ourselves are capable of that much strangeness, that much genius, that much ambition. We invented the UFO story in part because we found it easier to believe in visitors from the stars than to believe that our own species, under the right conditions, in the right desert, with the right obsessive engineers and test pilots willing to push beyond the edge of what was survivable, could build something that looked and moved and flew like nothing from this world. They did though, right there above that dry lake bed, 60 miles north of Las Vegas, in the silence of the Nevada sky where the stars come out so close and so bright that the distance between us and everything else in the universe seems, for just a moment, smaller than it really is. They did it, and they will keep doing it, and we will keep not knowing. And somewhere between the knowing and the not knowing, in that vast, sun-bleached space of secrecy and imagination, the story of Area 51 will go on being told by late-night road trippers and documentary filmmakers and history channels and government whistleblowers and people who swear, on everything they hold sacred, that they saw something in the sky above the Nevada desert that they cannot explain. Maybe they did. Maybe one day we will know what it was. Until then, the fence stands, the cameras watch, the trucks sit motionless in the distance, and whatever is behind those mountains, whatever has always been behind those mountains, stays exactly where it has always been. Secret, silent, and waiting,